Hello everyone. In this video, I'm going to talk about how can we send an email using one of the most famous frameworks in PHP, which is Laravel. So here I already have a project in Laravel framework. So how can we send an email using this framework? So at first, we should use the PHP artisan to create a control. So the first step is just go here and write something like PHP artisan and make your controller, and let's call this controller, for example, something like mail controller. So this is the first step. So the first step is to create a controller to this project. After you have created the controller, you should create a view and assign this view to the controller. So here, if we go here to the app HTTP controller, you will find our controller, which is the mail controller. Now the next step is to create the view. So here in this folder in the resources and inside view, just right click new PHP file, and let's call this one as mail.blade.php and click on finish. Now let's remove this code and write something like, for example, this is a test email. So this is the body of the message which we are going to send. So when we send email, the content of the message will be this is a test email. Now let's go to our controller, and the first step is to call the mail class by using useMail, and here let's define a function, public function, and let's call this function, for example, send. Now here will be our code. So what is the code used in PHP Laravel to send email? It's very simple. Just write something like mail and use the static function send, and here inside send we should define the following parameter, which is the first one, the text of this message. So the text of this message will be like this: refer to the name of the view. What is mail? Mail is the name of this view, which is mail.blade.php. But of course, we don't need blade.php because this define the template used in Laravel. So just write mail. Then we need an alias name for our email. So something like, for example, name and refer to, for example, let's call it, for example, Adenit weekly. Okay, so here we have defined our mail. Then the last thing is the callback function. This function is used to define the attribute of the mail. So when we send the mail using this text, which is here, this test mail, this function is a callback function to define the attribute of this message. So now let's create a variable called message, for example. Okay, and this variable will be used as a callback variable inside our function to define the attribute of the email. So let's start to define the attribute of this variable. So the first one will be from. So from where you are going to write, or let's start with to, for example. So in to, I'm going to define Adenit weekly at gmail.com. So I'm going to send an email to this one. So what's the alias name for this email? Let's call it, for example, Eden. And then what is the subject? So the subject of this email would be something like, for example, Laravel, for example. Okay, so here we have defined to whom we are going to send this email. We are going to send email to edenitweekly at gmail.com. The subject of this email is Laravel. Now let's define the two. So here, message from whom we are going to send this email. Here is the name or the email of the sender. And let's use this email, for example, 2003 at gmail.com. And let's define an alias name, something like Yazan, for example. So now everything is ready. Here is the text of the email. Here is alias name. Here the subject, from, or sorry, to, and here is the from. Now everything is ready. Let's go now to define a root for our controller. So we are going here to the root and open this web.php, and let's write something like root get, and let's define send as an action. So for which controller? For this one, which is mail controller at send. So this is the name of our controller, which is the mail controller, and send is the name of our function, and of course at the end we need this semicolon. So here we have do 3 steps. We have created the controller, the view, and we have defined the root. Now the last step is to go to the env file, which have the setting of the email. So let's open this file, which is the env. Let's go down here till this line. So here is the name of the driver, which is smtp, and because we are going to send to Gmail, I have write something like smtp.gmail.com. Here is the port number of the Gmail. Of course, you can search in Google what's the name of the port or what's the number of your port. And here is your email. Here is the encryption. And of course, here you should put your password. Now everything is ready. Let's try to run this example. So php artisan serve to run our web server. So now let's go to our browser. Okay, let's write something like localhost 8000 slash send, and let's press enter now. Yes, we have got this empty screen. But now, if I go to my Gmail, yes, as you can see here, we have got an email. The subject is Laravel, and here is this is e-test email. Okay, so in this video we have talked about how can we send an email using Laravel, and see you in the next week.